So just to quickly explain where we're coming from, health and education working together for isolated children. I don't think I have to explain to anybody here about how important health and education together are. Just go on to the next one. So we've got 224 pastoral leases in the NT, and ICPA NT represent 154 families from remote Northern Territory. So I've just, you'll see there's me where I am right now. There's a little yellow dot. I'm on the Central Arnhem Road heading out towards Nhulunbuy. And Amanda Murphy, who was going to sit here on the panel today, she's at near Cape Crawford there, near Borroloola. So I'm in between Beswick and Bullman. So if you're from the NT, you'll have an idea of where those Indigenous communities are. I'm 110 kilometres from Beswick, and I'm 100 kilometres from Bullman. In the middle, you'll see Mountain Valley there I am. So I'm 100 and something kilometres each way from any type of mobile service or any clinical care, I guess. So just on the next one. So I've got 3 children, and distance education is the way they're educated. So often the only way that they can be educated during their primary years. So there's typically between 1 and 4 children in the home classroom, and the majority of the teaching is delivered by a home tutor, which is often the mum. Sometimes it's what we call a governess, that's supported by some daily online lessons through School of the Air. So there's my little munchkins there. And next one. Okay, so I just wanted to talk to you quickly about our first-hand experience of what we've been through in the last 12 months. So there's my daughter Zali. When she was 8, she was diagnosed with Sydenham's chorea, which is a neurological manifestation of acute rheumatic fever. In the Territory, acute rheumatic fever is unfortunately quite common, but typically in Indigenous communities. But Sydenham's chorea is actually a very rare neurological disorder. So on to the next one. So yeah, rare disorder, just quickly, it's defined as random appearing continuous while awake involuntary movements which can affect the entire body. This often includes the face and tongue. Symptoms in arms and legs are often worse on one side of the body. Additional symptoms of Sydenham's may include slurring of speech and difficulty maintaining steady hand grip. Anxiety, sadness, inattention, and obsessive compulsive thoughts and behaviours may also occur. And it often affects children over the age of 5 years old, and usually girls. And Sydenham chorea usually develops within weeks to months following a strep A infection and may occur as an isolated finding or as a major complication of acute rheumatic fever. So the only way that you can diagnose acute rheumatic fever is through elimination. So every other serious thing that you can think of has to be eliminated first, because there is no way to actually say that it is Sydenham's until every single other thing has been discounted. So it's an autoimmune disorder, basically. On to the next one. Okay, so over a period of months before diagnosis, Sali's handwriting deteriorated, and I've just got an example there. So she's 8, and so we got to the point where we couldn't really understand what she was writing, and there was no real reason. In the weeks before, she'd become increasingly fidgety, inattentive, and had difficulty focusing on set tasks. She was repeatedly dropping things, such as her pencil. Her condition then deteriorated rapidly, and she was rushed to Catherine Hospital and immediately sent to Darwin. And within a very short time, she became unable to walk unaided. She could not feed herself. She needed assistance to do basic tasks, such as brush her teeth. She had a diminished capacity to put sentences together in a meaningful way. And eventually she became non-verbal and wheelchair bound. Extensive tests led to the diagnosis of Sydenham chorea as a complication. So just on to the next one. You can see her there in hospital. So Zali's symptoms was able to be alleviated with high-dose short-term steroid treatment over a few weeks. And there have been very limited studies to show long-term effects of symptoms. 1/3 of children will have a reoccurrence between 1.5 and 2.5 years after the initial onset. Many children report they have continuous issues with their fine motor skills, memory, and fatigue. And researchers have noted an association between recurrent symptoms and the later development of the abrupt onset of obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, tic disorders, autism, and which they call PANDAS. Further studies are needed to determine the nature of the association and biological pathways that connect strep infection, autoimmune response, and the later development of these specific behavioural disorders. And Zali will need prophylactic penicillin until she's at least 21. So we need to prevent those additional manifestations of rheumatic fever. So I know that how important it is for us to keep an eye on whether any of these movements start to reoccur, because that's an indication to me that she has acute rheumatic fever again. So on to the next one. So moving forward, so what does telehealth mean to us? From the moment that we left hospital, virtually we were on our own. There's no clinic, we have no GP. At the time, there was no GP in Katherine at all. So my nearest GP would be in Darwin, which is 8 hours away. And what we need, is regular video consultations with Zali's paediatrician to monitor her condition, video consultation with the paediatric neurologist located in Sydney, who is the only other person that could assist us during this whole time. Neurological assessments can be done at home and recorded to be sent to Zali's healthcare team. So I became very familiar very quickly with neurological assessments to see where she was at. Which we do often, quite often. If I see her doing some unusual movements, if I see a sudden deterioration of her handwriting, anything that sort of doesn't look quite right, we go back and we do that. So the situation there where to do for us, in order for us to come home and have some sense of normality, I can't assess exactly where she's at with those movements. So I needed to be able to send those off to our paediatricians, for them to send them off to the neurologist to say, well, what's going on here? And what do we do next? Unfortunately, with symptoms, it's quite rare, and there haven't really been a lot of research since the 70s. It's quite an unusual thing for a non-Indigenous girl to have in our environment, quite isolated environment. So our fine and gross motor skills can be monitored by the allied health team through telehealth against baseline assessments and adjustments and assistance methods implemented by occupational therapists. Appointments can be made with the least amount of disruption to Zali's schooling and day-to-day activities, resulting in better quality of life, and problems can be assessed in a timely manner to minimise residual symptoms impacting Zali's education. So just on to the next one. So what I've found that we could do better, video consultations for isolated children need to be seen as a typical way to provide healthcare. When we're in hospital, nobody really knew how we were going to be able to handle this once we left, because we were so isolated. We had no offers of video consultations. I had to really push for that, because there's no set standard procedure of how can we help geographically isolated children. Healthcare professionals need to have a better understanding of lifestyle and distance of geographically isolated families and their lack of access to healthcare. And not all remote children have access to or are permitted to use community clinics. So we're non-Indigenous. For us, I can travel 110 kilometres to the community clinic. And it's sort of dependent on what nurses and practitioners are there at the time as to whether we're seen. We're certainly not a priority at all. So a dedicated secure professional video conferencing system, which we've been looking at today, needs to be implemented. So currently we use private Zoom accounts and WhatsApp linked to individual mobile numbers, possible privacy issues and diminished continuity of care. So I don't know, like when she got sick and I had to monitor it from home and I was worried, and unfortunately, you know, the pediatricians had said, here's my phone number if you need, because they knew that we were out on our own, you know, if you need something. So I was able to take some videos and use WhatsApp to send them through to them so that they could look at those things and monitor them. But to be honest, I don't know whatever, you know, there's no history, there's no, I don't know whatever happens to those videos. You know, there's no continuity of care there. There's no way that we can look back and go, wow, you know, I look at that video without me holding on to all that stuff. And private Zoom accounts, you know, I'm lucky that we have a fantastic pediatrician that travels, but she'll do a consult for us at home if we need to from her home. But a professional video conferencing system would be amazing. Should be used in conjunction with face-to-face consultations, and health professionals should be visiting isolated children when practical, i.e. when there's the ability to have a face-to-face consultation, there should be allowances for practitioners to incorporate a pastoral property into their travel to community clinics. So as president of the Catherine branch, we have stories, many stories of similar situations where the children are on isolated pastoral properties and we've got practitioners going driving straight past their driveway, and there's no provision for them to be able to stop in and see those children, and they can't be seen at the clinic because they're not Indigenous. So there's quite a few things that we can do better here. So yep, that's it.
Great, thank you, Kerrie.
So we might just open this up for discussion. I would like to just perhaps ask a bit more, Kerrie, about is this, I've had a lot of complaints from a number of people going to remote clinics and being refused service because they're not Aboriginal. Do you want to just expand a bit on that for us?
So for me, I'm 110 kilometres from the nearest Indigenous community both ways. And a lot of the pastoral properties though are closer. We do have a problem where because there is the territory is such a transient community, so the healthcare professionals are often turned over quite a bit, and it's all quite, there's no standard practice, so it's dependent on which service provider is being used as to the rules of whether non-Indigenous people can be treated at the clinic. So for instance, I use I'm on one side of the territory and where we use one particular health provider at the clinics, and on the other side of the highway, on the other side of the Stewart Highway, they use a different one, and they're far more open to having non-Indigenous people in the community, in the pastoral community, to access the clinic. But sort of down toward Alice Springs, there's been actual notices sent out to say do not come to the clinic. You need to go to Alice Springs, so that could be an extra couple of 100 kilometres to see the same practitioner. So yeah, there's a few big issues there.